How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Welcome, one and all. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States, and boy, am I glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you'd like to be on the program, if you want the show notes, because you know when we get on the show at noon, about that time, we send out an email. All the stuff I'm going to talk about, the stuff I'm going to try to talk about if I have time, and you can get all the links to all of it. All you have to do is text the word data to 33777, subscribe. You get a discount on the subscription. And we've got so much stuff today. This is one of those rare days where I've sat down, what do I want to talk about? Where do I put this? Where do I put that? There's a lot that we got to cover, international and national. It can't all be politics today. We'll see where we wind up at the end of the show with all the other stuff. Now, I've got to begin here because this is the most pressing story, I think, for everyone, and that is early voting. Record-breaking first day of early voting in Georgia. Side note, and I'm going to start with the tangent. Some of you, I'm on a group chat, and one of the guys in the group chat says, I only vote on election day. That means you may not vote. I need you to understand this, particularly those of you who are Trump supporters. You have spun in your mind, many of you, so many conspiracy theories about the early voting. Democrats are all going to vote early. I would rather you vote early than not be able to vote on election day. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if Antifa shows up and tries to block people from voting in some states. Better you vote now than be disrupted on election day. I'm getting an absentee ballot. It arrives in the mail today, according to the email I got from the post office. It should be there today. I will be traveling, as I have every election year. I have to vote by absentee because I'm not around on election day. I'm traveling somewhere in the country for election day. You want to vote early if you can, and here's why. Storms, snow, traffic jams, Antifa disruptions, you name it. If you're trying to vote on election day, you may want the ceremony of it. You may believe the conspiracy theories. The conspiracy theories are largely crap. The ceremony of it, I understand. If I had a preference, it would be we all have to stand in line on election day and vote. But you don't have to if you don't want to. And there are plenty of people every year who do that, and it cost Republicans a House seat in New York in a special election just last year because there was a massive blizzard on the day of the election, and people couldn't make it to the polls, and they're not going to cancel the election due to weather. Now, those people just couldn't make it to the polls, and the Republicans lost a close race because not enough of them could show up. If you really want Donald Trump to win, you better go vote as soon as you can so that on election day when it gets here, you're not stuck in traffic or bad weather or an Antifa riot to keep you from voting. So go vote. But I need to say something very important. Some of you are looking at the early voting, particularly you Democrats, and you are getting a little bit excited by the early vote. I would not do that if I were you. Some of you Republicans are getting excited too when you look at Pennsylvania and you look at Florida. I would not do that if I were you. Early voting is not indicative of the winner of the election. In fact, here's what I suspect. Kamala Harris will win the early vote, and Donald Trump will win the day of vote. And that's not a hard guess to make because that's been the pattern. It used to be that Republicans always won the early vote. Republicans nationwide used to win the early vote. And then they elected a man named Donald Trump who convinced all the Republicans that early voting was some dark, sinister conspiracy and they should not do an early vote. And the result has been that now Democrats win the early vote because Republicans talk themselves out of going to vote early. You want to vote early, but if you don't vote early, vote on Election Day. But if you do vote on Election Day, don't interpret the results of early voting as a winner or loss for your candidate. They're actually meaningless. Statistically, they're pretty meaningless. We just happen to know that in the past, most Republicans showed up in early voting and Democrats showed up on Election Day, and now the pattern has reversed itself. You can't take a lot from the early vote. This is Harry Itten on CNN.
I rarely beg the audience for anything. I beg of you, don't read anything into any of these trends. Please, every 4 years we do the same gosh darn thing. Look, here's the bottom line. An Election Day vote counts the same as an early in-person vote or a mail vote. We know from the polling and we know through history that Kamala Harris is very likely going to win that mail vote. We know the early in-person vote is going to be very, very close. A point lead in this poll. I can find a few polls, in fact, where Trump is ahead in that. But we know that Donald Trump is going to crush the Election Day vote. And it doesn't matter when the vote is cast. They all count the same. One vote counts for one vote, whether it's cast today or whether it is cast on November 5th, John.
And that goes for people looking at this from both sides. There's nothing magical about an election day vote versus a vote that's mailed in early. There are trends, though, that you can compare when you're talking about early voting, mail voting, in-person voting.
You can try. You could certainly try. But remember where we were 4 years ago? There was a pandemic. We were in the midst of the COVID pandemic. John and I couldn't stand next to each other 4 years ago. The bottom line is this. There's no discernible baseline in most of these states because in 2020, 69% of the vote was cast early, in person, or by mail. This year, we're looking at maybe about 52%. So how are you supposed to compare this year to 4 years ago? And more than that, you know, you might say, okay, all that record early in-person voting, right? But here's the deal. Even the components of that early vote are going to change because the mail vote is going to be way down. Here's a projection, 23% for this year compared to 43% 4 years ago. The early in-person vote could actually go up. That's what the NBC News poll is suggesting, 29% versus 26% 4 years ago. But the overall complexion and the overall number of folks who are going to cast a ballot before Election Day is going to go way down. But the way they're going to do it is very likely going to change. It just makes it.
Okay. He's right. That is the data. And by the way, the trend lines do appear to hold up. There are fewer absentee ballot requests this year than there were in 2020 because there is no COVID. So some of those absentee ballot voters will show up and stand in line in early voting. I have friends who stood in line and voted this morning here in Georgia. There will be people who vote on Election Day who otherwise would have voted by absentee ballot. I'll vote by absentee ballot because I'll be on the road for the day of the election and won't be able to. So you can't extrapolate anything on who's going to win the race based on early voting. And everybody wants to. Oh, my gosh, did you know that the number of people voting right now, it's just 2-1 Republicans in Pennsylvania right now. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Stop it. Stop trying to. You're not even looking at chicken bones and tea leaves. You're looking at the shadow of dog poop that's rolled off onto something. You're not interpreting this well. Your tarot cards are not going to help. Neither will your magic crystals. You can't do it. And everybody wants to do it, myself included. But here's what we can take from this. The shameless racial pathological lies of Democrats in 2022 in Georgia. Yesterday in Georgia, 300,000 people voted early. The very first day of early voting in Georgia. If you requested an absentee ballot a month ago, yesterday they were processed and sent out the door. Couldn't do it before that. Yesterday was the first day. And in 2022, Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, and all the other Democrats said it was Jim Crow 2.0, the election reforms in Georgia. Brian Kemp said, no, we've made it easy to vote and hard to cheat in Georgia. Democrats said, no, this is racism. This is racism. Remember the lie they told you? You wouldn't be able to have water at the polls, which was a lie. It actually is a lie. They said all these things, and the media didn't challenge them. The media said they're right. The media went with the Democratic talking point. This is going to suppress the black vote. This is going to suppress the vote. This is going to make it harder to vote. It hasn't. In Georgia, there's a record early vote. In Georgia, black voters and white voters, they're all turning out to vote. In Georgia, Major League Baseball in 2022 pulled the All-Star game from the state in protest of voter suppression laws. They were bullied by Stacey Abrams. She used it as a campaign event. So there's a big music festival in Atlanta, Music Midtown. Brian Kemp, of course, Stacey Abrams, they're on the ballot. Brian Kemp signs a law that gives constitutional carry in Georgia. You don't need a concealed carry permit anymore in Georgia. You can have constitutional carry. You can just go out and get your, you can carry a gun. You don't need a special permit. And music, we can't have our concert here. Stacey Abrams played it up. Oh my gosh. Look at this. They're canceling music festivals and baseball games because Republicans went overboard with concealed carry laws and voter ID laws, and Republicans are regressing the state as Jim Crow 2.0, and everybody's got a gun and we're all going to die. And the music festival canceled. Turns out they're having financial difficulty. And Major League Baseball canceled under pressure from Democratic activists. And you got a record turnout in the state of Georgia, 300,000 people. In Pennsylvania, what is very notable and what is kind of telling, and you can extrapolate this to a degree, Republican voter registration has surged. In Pennsylvania, you got to declare your party, and Republican voter registration has increased at a higher pace than Democrats. In Florida, Democrats are outpacing Republicans in the early vote, but it's closer than it should be. You cannot extrapolate who's going to win Election Day from the early vote. What you can do, though, is you can look at some level of voter enthusiasm and say it is interesting, for the first time in 3 decades, according to Gallup, more people want to identify as a Republican than a Democrat. It is interesting in Pennsylvania that Republicans' voter registration is surging. And in Florida, the Democrats don't have a broad gap from the GOP in early voting. And it is interesting in Georgia. 300,000 people around the state showed up on the first day of early voting to vote. I have been telling people all along for a year and a half or so in Biden versus Trump that this was probably going to be a low turnout election. Kamala Harris entering the race has changed the dynamic. And Democrats look at this and say, it's about us. It means we're going to win. Actually, no. You know, I need more fingers and toes than I have, and I have all of mine, to be able to count the number of people I know who have said privately, honestly, I wasn't going to go vote. Trump versus Biden, who cares? And these same people are now like, I got to go vote to stop Kamala Harris. She is a radical progressive. There were a lot of people who don't like Donald Trump who were just going to say, 4 more years of Joe Biden. We've survived these 4. We'll survive 4 more. Who are now like, oh, hell no, I got to go stop Kamala Harris. This woman's nuts and also stupid. It's why you're seeing her collapse in the polls all of a sudden as non-Trump Republican voters consolidate behind Trump, realizing she's too radical. We got to go vote against her. This, my friends, tells me a few things. 1, we're going to have higher turnout than I expected. 2, Republicans have consolidated towards Donald Trump. And 3, you still can't interpret early voting to tell you who's going to win. What you can interpret it as, however, is people have decided they're going to go vote in this election. And by the way, that high turnout works for Donald Trump. Do you know why? Ultimately, this isn't extrapolating from early voting. This is just extrapolating the general trend. A higher vote means those low propensity voters are turning out. And those low propensity voters, they're voting for Donald Trump. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you wish to be on the program. Yesterday, I received an email from the Census Bureau. Probably 99% of you listening don't get these emails that I get. And the reason I get the email is because I have a business. And as the business owner to whom the employer identification number, EIN, is tied to, it's like a social security number for a business, I am required by law to do census surveys. It's how the government gets the data on employment and economic outlook and things like that. And I'm required by law to do them. And if I don't do them, I actually can get in legal trouble with the federal government. And I got a stern email from the Census Bureau that I was 6 weeks past due, do this or expect a visit, basically. And you can't get out of it. This is how I know, for example, that so many of the government stats, they're not rigged data. I mean, all of us who own a business, we are compelled by law to answer these stupid surveys. However, when you have a bunch of bureaucrats who, like Joe Biden, and let's be honest here, the civil service of the United States is overwhelmingly stacked with Democrats. It is funny how the revisions always benefit Joe Biden because, as you and I both know, the correction never gets the same airtime as the original story. So the original story is jobs exploded in this country. The correction is actually we had fewer jobs. That correction doesn't get as much attention. The federal government has revised down the jobs created by 1 million jobs, roughly 899,000 jobs. And every month the same thing comes up. The the Bureau of Labor Statistics comes out and says we had a bunch of jobs. Next month they come out with a new statement and says we got another bunch of jobs. But by the way, last month we're revising down that number. And it happens every time. Well, now it turns out the FBI has done the same with crime. And it looks like crime in 2022 was actually higher than it was. Now, I sent out a breaking news story on this morning. John Lott reporting this from Real Clear Politics. You should know, however, a friend of mine who is a conservative did send me a private note and says he actually thinks John Lott misread the data and overstated the case. But this is the story that's got conservatives abuzz today. It looks like the FBI revising its crime stats. Now, I got to tell you about Hillsdale College. We'll have more on this in a little bit. Hillsdale College, though, boy, they've got a course on entrepreneurship in this country. They've got a great thing in Imprimis this month about lies, damn lies, and statistics and crime in this country. Highly informative. It's show prep for your mind and mind. If you go to ericforhillsdale.com, you can get it for free. In fact, if you go to ericforhillsdale.com today, you can get a free pocket Constitution Declaration of Independence from Hillsdale College. In addition to that, you can get these great podcasts from Hillsdale College on your favorite podcast network completely free. You can get Imprimis completely for free. You can get Larry Arnn's lectures on the Constitution completely for free, or Victor Davis Hanson's on citizenship. Those are really good, by the way. All you got to do is go to ericforhillsdale.com, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. Put in your info. You're going to get this free pocket Constitution Declaration of Independence, but you're also going to get so much more show prep for your mind on a daily basis, all of it free from Hillsdale College at ericforhillsdale.com. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I am going to actually go on a tangent and talk about something I was not going to talk about at this moment, but I think I owe it to listener Landon, who put this on my radar. Okay, there's a backstory here. I have admitted once on radio that I have Helen Keller jokes. I mean, everybody has Helen Keller jokes. Some people just won't admit they have Helen Keller jokes. My son actually sent me one this morning. What is Helen Keller's favorite color? Velcro. And I don't, if people get offended by Helen Keller jokes. Oh, Helen Keller. Helen Keller was a horrible human being. I mean, she may be a hero because she was blind and deaf and overcame a lot, but by the end of her life, she was a communist who hated people and wasn't a very nice person. I mean, I suppose if I was old and blind and deaf, I might be bitter as well. That is true. But we all learn about Helen Keller in school because we learn about the woman who taught her sign language, Annie, what's her name? And we all learn sign language, but Helen Keller was a communist. She was an actual communist. She actually supported communists and big abortion rights supporter and everything else. She was not the person that you were raised to believe she was by the liberals in your high school and middle school. She was actually not a nice person. I don't mind Helen Keller jokes. There are some very funny Helen Keller jokes. In any event, so a listener named Landon emailed me, and his subject was Helen Keller guy. And then he emailed me again, and the subject was Helen Keller guy again, and we've kept this email thread going. And today, he sent me a story that should be on everyone's radar that is not about Helen Keller. It is about Haiti. This is from The Guardian. Haiti residents fear fate is in God's hand after gang commits worst mass killing in decades. The killers came under the cover of darkness, stealing across the Artibonite River on an abandoned bridge before marauding through this once tranquil rural community with automatic rifles and knives. They were like headless chickens shooting at anyone they saw, said Lucille Francois, a resident of the Haitian town of Ponsonde, who somehow survived the slaughter. Francois heard the first shots of the gang invasion at around 3 a.m., leapt from his bed, and gathered at the town entrance with members of a local vigilante group called the Coalition. Despite their attempts to organize, its members soon realized they were outgunned. They fled into the surrounding hills, where bleary-eyed, petrified locals were cowering. The gangs shot at anything that moved, even dogs. They came to wipe out the whole area. It was a premeditated massacre, said Francois, 41, who lost 6 friends and relatives in the pre-dawn onslaught. His voice shaking with emotion, Francois described the scenes he witnessed later that morning when he returned to the area with police who had pushed back the intruders. The assailants had forced their way into homes, murdering anyone they could find. At one junction, Francois saw 4 corpses near a house that was going up in flames. Further ahead, a school and a health clinic had been torched. On one street alone, 19 bodies were splayed in the dirt, men, women, and a 3-year-old child, said the father of 3. Those scenes, while horrifying, represented only a fraction of the butchery, with the full death toll only becoming clear a week after the attack. At least 115 people are now believed to have been shot or stabbed to death when gang members swept through Ponsonde in apparent retribution for the market town's refusal to submit to the authority of their group. The victims reportedly included babies and the elderly. One of those killed was Francois' cousin, whose body, the first that he discovered, was found lying in a pool of blood. His head had been shattered by bullets and his chest sliced open with a machete, Francois said after attending 3 funerals in a single day. In such a small community, it's impossible to process all of this. And on the story goes. Donald Trump was attacked as a racist for referring to Haiti as a poop hole country. He's not wrong. It's a third world hellhole. And it's in our backyard. Now, I need to tie a separate story to this, 2 separate stories. Story 1. The Chinese and the Russian navies have been visiting Cuba more regularly. Cuba is right across from Haiti. Story 2. Did you know there is now an Iranian military presence in Venezuela? And they're working with who? The Chinese and the Russians and the Venezuelans. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, wants to invade Guyana next door to him to seize some oil-rich territory for Venezuela. And the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians have been helping. My guess is that what the Chinese would like to do is to coordinate an invasion of this American ally in South America while also invading Taiwan, Russia moving further into Europe, and Iran doing God knows what with Israel, all at the same time provoking World War III, distracting the United States so it can't manage everything. Haiti is ripe for the taking. The Haitian government collapsed, leadership fled, gangs are running all over the place. 115 people dead in one town that refused to submit to the authority of the gang. Listen, even though I disagree with those of you who think we shouldn't be helping Ukraine, I understand it. This is our backyard. This is the Western Hemisphere. And this is not that far from the United States. Haiti is not far from Puerto Rico or the American Virgin Islands. It's not that far from Florida. And remember, Kamala Harris says that her job was not actually border czar, even though they were fine when you called her that originally, but it was the root causes, what's causing this mass wave of immigration. One of those things is the collapse of places like Haiti. You want to stem the massive flood of Haitian immigrants into this country? You need to deal with Haiti. And by the way, we have national security reasons to do this as well, because the Haitian government has collapsed, and we really, truly, genuinely want to make sure that, well, we don't have China, Russia, and Iran set up shop. Do you want to have a Chinese military installation a couple 100 miles from the southern United States? Do you really want to have that? It's bad enough the Cubans have been letting them come into Havana, 90 miles south. Haiti's not that much further. We got Puerto Rico down there. Do you really want the Chinese and the Russians to solve the problem in Haiti, or us? We've had to do it before. I think this is something we need to consider, and this problem is festering now. This is a humanitarian disaster, and where is Joe Biden? Over 90 people now are dead. 92 people are unaccounted for in North Carolina. 90 dead, 92 missing. Where is Joe Biden on this? Is he at the beach? Fatalities have been reported across 21 counties. The vast majority were reported in Buncombe County, 42 deaths, followed by Yancey and Henderson at 11 and 7. And by the way, there are reports that have been coming out of the mountains that there may be many more people dead. There are 92 people unaccounted for. One elementary school teacher said that a significant population of the children haven't come back to school. They don't know if the kids are dead or just can't make it off the mountains. There are a lot of people dead. Where's the president? You know, here's the thing, and this goes to the media bias on all of these sorts of things. If the Republicans were in charge, you and I know darn well what the media reaction to all of this would be, whether it was Haiti or North Carolina. The Republican president would be held responsible. They're very good, the media is, at blaming Republicans for everything. They're very good at the media is blaming Republicans for things that are Democrats' fault. But we've got a collapsing third world nation south of us that is in our strategic interest to deal with before the Chinese decide to go in there and deal with it and set up shop. And the media is absolutely clueless. We got a story in the Wall Street Journal I'll spend some time with the next hour, that for 17 days, drones were doing flyovers of American military installations in Virginia. And the government, you know what it did? Covered it up instead of dealing with it. They didn't know what to do. Their excuse was, well, the law prohibited us from shooting the drones down since it was in the United States. Now, I'm sorry, but I got to tell you, point blank, If I were the commander-in-chief of the American military and spy drones from a foreign power were flying over our American military installations, I would order the soldiers to shoot them down and say, one, I will pardon you if you get in trouble, and two, if I get impeached, I dare them to impeach me. We've had foreign incursions in military installations. You know what Joe Biden did? Said, don't say a word to anybody, cover it up. For 17 days this happened. He's getting a pass from the press. That is a hill to die on. If you're the commander-in-chief, that's the hill to die on. Foreign powers buzzing over you. You got to do something. You got to do something. It's just absurd to me that we're in a situation like this now. We've got a country collapsing, and the refugees are pouring into this country. The Biden administration legally allowing these people to come in. They're taking over towns in the United States, upending cultures. A lot of them hard workers. That God bless them. They're doing great jobs. But in many cases, employers say, well, it's easier for me to hire them to hire Americans, so I'm going to hire them and keep these Americans unemployed. I don't fault the Haitians for coming here and for doing a good job. What I do fault are the businesses that have decided I would rather spend my time hiring Haitians than hiring Americans because they're cheaper. We have real problems, and we have no leadership in the White House, and Kamala Harris has been there for 3.5 years. Kamala Harris is out deciding that the way to get black men to vote for her is to offer them free weed, free legal weed. That's her solution. We're going to legalize it. I think they want jobs and cheap groceries, which they had under Donald Trump, which is why so many of them are voting for him. If a white guy were to come along and say, you know what, that's the ticket. I'm going to say I'm going to legalize weed. That'll give me the black men's vote. Wouldn't they be vilified as a racist? It's what white people who are advising Harris think black men want. And that's a damning indictment on the racists advising Kamala Harris that these white people who also worked for Barack Obama said, hey, weed, that's the ticket to get black men to vote for you, weed. Only some Poindextery progressive white guy from the Ivy League would say that, and yet they did, and Kamala Harris is now mouthing it off. You got Haiti in collapse. You got hundreds missing or dead in North Carolina. A president of the United States nowhere to be seen, and a vice president of the United States saying any stupid thing that pops into her head to try to get black men to vote for her. This is not leadership. It's a dereliction of duty at a time of international crises, and they're making it worse. And too many Democrats and members of the media are willing to ignore it all because Orange Man bad. That's why Orange Man going to win. Now, I got to tell you about Americans for Prosperity that, by the way, has been advocating a lot of common sense conservative solutions dealing with the border situation, Haiti, school choice, so much more. They'd love to have you on their side. They're the largest and leading grassroots organization in the United States, and they happen to be conservative. And they'd love to have you join them at americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go sign up with them today, and they will start giving you all the information you need to be the smartest person in your circle of friends so you can be the most informed and the influencer who influences other people. You'll also learn how to knock on doors and persuade your neighbors that voting for common sense conservative solutions actually can benefit them. They'll teach you how to go to your state government, your local government. They have chapters in virtually every state. They'd love to have you involved with them. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP. They're going to get you involved. They're going to train you. They're going to keep you informed. And they would love for you to be a part of their organization. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you need a heavy equipment loan for your business, you got great credit, they can move very fast. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com. All their contact info is there. But let's say also you need $250,000 or more for a franchise, or you're buying on a business partner or a business rival. Those are the deals they specialize in. They've been making business decisions since the 90s. The Frost family is really good at this. They'd love to help your business. FirstLibertyGA.com. I get asked a lot of questions about low propensity voters. Who are low propensity voters? Low propensity voters are voters who don't have a high propensity to vote. Now, what really makes those? Okay, so highly educated people vote in every election. They vote in primaries. They vote in runoffs. They vote in midterms. They vote in municipal odd year elections. They vote in presidential elections. A low propensity voter tends to be middle class, college but not post-grad or no college, and they vote in presidential election years, or they vote in general elections and not primaries. So it depends on what your tabulation is for them, but a low propensity voter in particular is a voter who doesn't vote in primaries. And more specifically, for a presidential election year, a low propensity voter is a voter who votes in presidential election years, but tends not to vote in midterms or municipal elections that tend to fall in odd-numbered years. So, in other words, a low propensity voter tends to have a high propensity to vote in a general election in a presidential year. The problem for parties that rely on low propensity voters is in midterm elections, those parties tend to be destroyed, which in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was the Democrats. The Democrats had low propensity voters. They wouldn't show up in midterm elections, and it helped the Republicans in the 90s. It helped George W. Bush in 2002. It helped Republicans in 2010, 2014. Well, they've shifted, and now it's Republican voters tend to rely more on low propensity voters, and highly educated post-grad holders, they vote Democrat. They turn out every election, and so that helps the Democrats now in midterms, and it doesn't help the Republicans, except, again, a low propensity voter is a voter who will still vote in a presidential election year. And a lot of people have forgotten that terminology. The low propensity voters vote in presidential election years. It's the midterms, the off-year elections that they don't particularly vote in. The primaries, they don't particularly vote. But they'll show up in a general election in a presidential year. And the early vote totals, again, we cannot make a determination on who's going to win based on these early vote numbers. But what I can tell you is these low propensity voters are standing in line with everyone else and voting. They are turning out. Here in Georgia, Brian Kempis flipped on his ground game machine, getting people out to vote as early voting arrives, and they're showing up. In Republican parts of the state, huge lines. In Democratic parts of the states, huge lines. People are turning up. When we come back, Kamala Harris has decided we got to study reparations as another ploy to get black voters to vote for her. Oh, yes, I have the audio.